Welcome to Crossdressing Stories. Here, we share personal stories, celebrate self-expression. If you're on your own journey or simply curious, you've found your community. Subscribe and join the conversation.
The silence in Liam's studio was a living thing, thick and heavy with the smell of turpentine and failure. For 2 years, he had poured his soul into his art, creating large, abstract canvases that felt to him like raw, bleeding emotions. To the art world, however, they were just unsold inventory. At 32, Liam was a sculptor by trade and a painter by passion, but in the cold, hard language of finance, he was a liability. His wife, Evelyn, was the opposite. She was a senior executive at a high-powered public relations firm, a woman who sculpted narratives and painted perceptions with ruthless efficiency. Their sleek, minimalist apartment, paid for entirely by her salary, was her gallery, and he was the one exhibit that didn't fit. She had been patient at first, calling his art his journey, but lately, her patience had worn as thin as the expensive porcelain she favored. The latest blow had been the final one. A prestigious gallery that had shown interest for months sent him a curt, 2-sentence email. While we appreciate your unique vision, your work does not align with our current commercial direction. It was a polite way of saying his art was unsellable. He was cleaning his brushes when Evelyn came home. She didn't have to ask. The slump of his shoulders told the whole story. She didn't offer sympathy. Instead, she placed her sleek leather briefcase on the kitchen island and looked at him with an expression he knew all too well, the one she used on a failing brand before a complete overhaul. "I had lunch with Marcus Thorne today," she said, her voice cool and level. Marcus Thorne was the CEO of the largest media conglomerate in the country, and Evelyn's firm was desperate to land his account. "How did it go?" Liam asked, his voice flat. "It was illuminating," she said, pulling a bottle of sparkling water from the fridge. "He's looking for a new firm, and he's considering us. This contract would be the biggest of my career. It would mean a partnership. It would mean we never have to worry about money again." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "But he's a family man, Liam. He values a certain image. Stability. A strong partnership where both parties contribute to the family's success." Liam felt a familiar knot of shame tighten in his gut. "And I'm not contributing." Evelyn didn't deny it. She took a slow sip of water. "Marcus mentioned he's hosting an exclusive, month-long corporate retreat in the south of France for his executive team and their partners. It's to build synergy before the big merger. Attendance is mandatory. He invited me." She finally looked at him, and her eyes were like chips of ice. "He also made a comment about my struggling artist husband. He said he hopes you're not a distraction from my focus." The insult was so direct, so humiliating, that Liam couldn't even form a response. "So," Evelyn continued, her voice dropping, "we have a problem. I cannot bring a failed artist who reeks of turpentine and disappointment to this retreat. It would kill the deal. But I also cannot go alone. It would signal instability." She walked towards him, her expression unreadable. "But I have a solution. A rebranding, if you will. One that will guarantee my success and, by extension, our future." Liam stared at her, a cold, creeping dread washing over him. "Rebranding? What are you talking about, Evelyn? You want me to get a haircut and wear a suit? I can do that." A small, humorless smile touched her lips. "Oh, it's far more comprehensive than that, darling. A suit can't hide the look of failure in a man's eyes. It's too ingrained. No, the brand Liam, the artist, is being discontinued. We're launching a new one." She walked to her briefcase and pulled out a sleek, beautifully designed portfolio. It looked like one of her high-end client presentations. She opened it on the kitchen island. The first page was a headshot of a woman. A beautiful, softly smiling woman with warm, intelligent eyes and auburn hair styled in an elegant chignon. Below the photo, in a chic, serif font, were the words, "Liana Vance, personal assistant and lifestyle consultant." Liam's breath caught in his throat. He looked from the photo to Evelyn, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. "Who is this?" "This," Evelyn said, tapping a perfectly manicured finger on the photo, "is you. Or rather, who you will be for the next month. Liana Vance. My indispensable, incredibly organized, and utterly professional female assistant. Marcus values efficiency and loyalty. He'll see Liana as an asset, a reflection of my own dedication. He won't see her as a distraction. He'll see her as a tool for my success. The room began to spin. Liam leaned against the counter, his legs suddenly weak. Evelyn, this is a joke. This is insane. I can't. I'm not a woman. Her expression hardened. The mask of corporate calm dropped, revealing the cold, sharp fury that lay beneath. And you're not a successful artist, are you? You're not a provider. You're not a partner in any meaningful sense of the word. You are a dependent. You live in my apartment, you eat the food I buy, you use the art supplies I pay for. For 2 years, I have subsidized your passion. Now, it's time for you to contribute. This isn't contributing, this is erasing me, he protested, his voice cracking. It's a role, she snapped, her voice like the crack of a whip. Actors play roles every day, Liam. Your problem is that you've been playing the wrong one. The starving artist is a tired cliché, and it's not paying the bills. Liana, on the other hand, will be an investment in our future, a future you have done nothing to secure. She stepped closer, her tone dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. So here's the deal. For 1 month, you will be Liana. You will do exactly as I say. You will play your part flawlessly. We will land this contract, and when we return, you can go back to your little hobby, funded by my success. Or, she paused, letting the threat hang in the air, you can refuse. And you can see how far your artistic integrity gets you when you're trying to find a studio apartment you can't afford. You can take your canvases and see who's willing to trade them for a meal. He looked into her unyielding eyes and saw no trace of the woman he had married. He saw a strategist, a closer, a woman who had identified a problem and was now executing the most ruthless possible solution. He was trapped not by steel bars, but by his own failure and dependency. She had backed him into a corner, and the only way out was to surrender the very last thing he had left, himself. I'll do it, he heard himself say, the words feeling like a betrayal, a final, quiet death. I knew you'd see it my way, Evelyn said, her triumphant smile returning. Good. We have our first appointment tomorrow. We need to get Liana's hair and skin properly prepped. The brand launch is officially underway. The brand launch began the next afternoon at a private, appointment-only salon so exclusive it didn't even have a sign. The interior was a hushed, minimalist space of concrete floors and warm, diffused lighting. It felt less like a salon and more like a high-end art gallery, a place where people were the sculptures being perfected. Evelyn's stylist, a man named Jean-Pierre with a dramatic silver streak in his black hair, assessed Liam with the detached air of a surgeon planning an incision. The bone structure is quite good, Ev, he commented, circling Liam's chair. Strong jaw, but the eyes are nice. We can soften the rest. Liam sat rigid, staring at his own reflection in the mirror. He saw a man with tired eyes, a 2-day stubble, and hair that was an unruly testament to his disregard for appearance. He looked like what he was, a defeated artist. The deconstruction started with his hair. He was used to hacking at it himself with scissors when it got too long. Jean-Pierre, however, was an artist. He washed, conditioned, and then meticulously cut, shaping Liam's thick, dark hair. The familiar weight was lifted, replaced by a style that was longer on top and softer around the ears. Then came the color, a warm, rich auburn, the same color as the woman in the headshot. The chemical smell of the dye was sharp and alien, and the feeling of Jean-Pierre's expert fingers massaging it into his scalp was so unnervingly intimate that Liam had to close his eyes. Next came the skin. A quiet esthetician led him to a separate room where he was subjected to his first ever facial. His face was steamed, cleansed, exfoliated, and moisturized until his skin, usually rough and weathered, felt unnaturally soft and smooth to the touch. The stubble he had worn like a shield was meticulously shaved away, leaving his jawline feeling naked and exposed. The most humiliating part was the body hair removal. Liana would have impeccable grooming standards, Evelyn had stated, as if it were a non-negotiable clause in a contract. In the privacy of the treatment room, the esthetician worked with a quiet, clinical efficiency, waxing his chest, his arms, his legs. The sharp, stinging pain was a constant, agonizing reminder of the violation. Each strip of wax that was ripped away felt like it was taking a piece of his masculinity with it. He lay there, clenching his fists, his body a landscape being forcibly terraformed. Back in Jean-Pierre's chair, the final, most transformative steps began. Now, we introduce Liana, the stylist murmured, laying out a vast and intimidating array of makeup brushes, palettes, and tubes. He was taught the fundamentals as if he were a child. Jean-Pierre showed him how to apply a light, tinted moisturizer to even out his skin tone, how to use a concealer pen to hide the dark circles of exhaustion under his eyes. His unruly eyebrows were plucked, waxed, and shaped into gentle, defined arches. The eyes are everything, Jean-Pierre explained, his tone a mixture of artist and instructor. He demonstrated how a subtle line of brown eyeliner could make his eyes appear larger, and a single coat of mascara could make his lashes look longer and thicker, creating a softer, more feminine gaze. Liam watched his own reflection, horrified, as the man in the mirror slowly began to recede, replaced by a softer, prettier, and utterly foreign version of himself. The final touch was a sheer, rose-tinted lip balm. Nothing too dramatic for the daytime, Jean-Pierre said. Just a hint of color. It suggests health and vitality. When it was all done, Jean-Pierre spun the chair around. Evelyn, who had been observing the whole process with a critical eye, nodded in approval. Good. The canvas is prepped. It's a believable foundation. Liam looked at himself in the full-length mirror. The man looking back at him had his eyes, but they were now framed by soft, auburn hair and dark lashes. His jaw was the same, but the skin was smooth and glowing. He was wearing his old jeans and t-shirt, but they now looked jarring and wrong against the newly softened canvas of his face and body. He touched his cheek. It felt like silk. It didn't feel like his. This wasn't a rebranding. It was an erasure. And it was only the beginning. The next 2 weeks were a relentless boot camp in the art of becoming Liana. Liam's art studio was dismantled, the canvases and sculptures packed away into a storage unit Evelyn had rented. The space was repurposed, transformed into Liana's office, and, more importantly, her training ground. Evelyn had a full-length mirror installed on one wall and a clothing rack filled with what she called Liana's foundational wardrobe. It was a sea of neutral colors, silk blouses, tailored trousers, pencil skirts, and elegant, simple sheath dresses. It was the uniform of a woman who was professional, stylish, and completely serious. Liana's brand is competence, Evelyn explained, her voice echoing the way she would brief a client. Her style is understated elegance. She doesn't need to be flashy. Her efficiency is what gets her noticed. The first lessons were in posture and movement. Liam was a sloucher, a man used to moving with the loose-limbed gait of someone who didn't care about appearances. Evelyn was ruthless in her corrections. Stop slouching, Liam. Liana has presence. Shoulders back, spine straight. She would command, tapping his back with a ruler. You walk like a longshoreman. The steps are smaller, quieter. You are not trying to conquer the ground. You are gliding over it. The biggest hurdle was the footwear. The wardrobe included an array of sensible but mandatory heels, ranging from low, 2-inch pumps to slightly higher stilettos for evening events. For Liam, whose feet were accustomed to paint-splattered work boots, they were a fresh form of hell. He spent hours wobbling back and forth across the polished concrete floor of the studio, his ankles screaming in protest, while Evelyn offered sharp, critical feedback. Don't lock your knees. It's a fluid motion. Heel, then toe. And for God's sake, stop looking at your feet. Liana is confident. She looks ahead. His daily routine was now dictated by a schedule Evelyn had printed out and taped to the fridge. Mornings were for physical conditioning, yoga and Pilates, routines she claimed would create a leaner, more graceful physique. Afternoons were for brand education. He was given stacks of magazines like Forbes, The Economist, and the Financial Times. Liana needs to be conversant in the world of business, Evelyn declared. She needs to understand the market, the players, the terminology. You will read these cover to cover. Evenings were for practical application. She would drill him on the makeup routine Jean-Pierre had designed, forcing him to practice until he could apply the concealer and mascara without smudging. His hands, so skilled at wielding a sculpting tool or a paintbrush, were clumsy and awkward with an eyeliner pencil. She also coached him on his voice and speech. He was taught to speak in a slightly higher register, to soften his consonants, and to eliminate the sarcastic, dry humor that was his natural way of communicating. Liana is earnest and professional, she would remind him. She is helpful, not witty. Her job is to make her boss look good, not to get the laugh. During these sessions, Liam felt a profound sense of dissociation. It was as if he were watching a movie of his own life, a bizarre art house film where the main character was being systematically reprogrammed. He would catch his reflection in the mirror, a figure with a soft, made-up face, standing awkwardly in heels. And for a moment, he wouldn't recognize himself. The person he saw was Liana. She was learning, she was adapting, she was becoming more real with each passing day. And with every step she took forward, the man she was replacing, the man he used to be, took a step back into the shadows. The 2 weeks of relentless training were taking a toll Liam hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just the physical exhaustion from the heels and the Pilates. It was a deeper, more insidious erosion of his self. Evelyn, ever the strategist, noticed it too, but her analysis was purely tactical. "Your physique is still too masculine," she announced one evening, looking at him with a critical frown as he stood in a simple sheath dress. "The yoga is helping, but your muscle mass is a problem. It reads as male, even under the clothes." Liam, who had once taken a quiet pride in his strong, capable sculptor's hands and the solid build from years of working with stone and metal, felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you want me to do, Evelyn? I can't just will my muscles away." "No," she said, her voice matter of fact. "But we can adjust your diet." From that day on, his meals changed. The hearty, simple food he used to enjoy, pastas, breads, the occasional steak, vanished. His diet was now curated by Evelyn with the precision of a scientist. Breakfast was a green smoothie that tasted of kale and despair. Lunch was a small quinoa salad with lemon vinaigrette. Dinner was a piece of steamed fish with asparagus. He was perpetually, gnawingly hungry. The most disturbing change was something she added to his morning smoothie. He found the box one day while searching for a real tea bag in the back of the pantry, a high-potency soy protein isolate. He recognized the word phytoestrogen from a health article he'd once skimmed. He confronted her, holding the box like it was a vial of poison. "What is this, Evelyn?" She didn't even have the grace to look guilty. "It's a protein supplement," she said calmly. "It's used to promote a leaner physique. Bodybuilders use it." "It's a plant-based estrogen," he shot back, his voice trembling with a mixture of anger and fear. "You're trying to change my body chemistry." "I am trying to ensure our success," she corrected him, her voice cold and sharp. "This is a temporary measure for a temporary role. It will soften your features, reduce muscle definition. It will make Liana more believable. Do you want Marcus Thorne's deal or not? This is part of the cost of entry. Drink your smoothie, Liam." He felt a profound sense of violation, of being drugged by his own wife. But once again, he was trapped. He drank the smoothies, and over the next week, he started to feel the changes. His skin seemed to get softer. The already slow growth of his body hair became even sparser. He felt weaker, his energy levels constantly low from the calorie deficit. The most alarming change was a strange, unfamiliar sensitivity in his chest. It was a systematic, chemical subtraction of his masculinity, layer by layer. He was becoming softer, weaker, more pliable. He was becoming less Liam. And as he looked at his reflection one morning, noticing the subtle but undeniable softening of his jawline, a terrifying thought struck him. Evelyn wasn't just creating a costume for him to wear. She was trying to build a new person from the inside out. The corporate retreat was held at a sprawling, centuries-old chateau in Provence, France, surrounded by lavender fields and ancient olive groves. The air was warm and smelled of rosemary and sun-baked earth. It was a place of staggering beauty, but to Liam, it felt like the world's most beautiful prison. They arrived in a private car, sweeping up a long, gravel driveway to the magnificent stone facade of the chateau. As Liana, he was dressed in what Evelyn called elegant travel wear, a pair of wide-legged cream linen trousers, a simple silk camisole, a beige cashmere cardigan, and low, comfortable, but still distinctly feminine, leather loafers. His face was a mask of light, natural-looking makeup, and the bobbed wig was perfectly in place. Marcus Thorne, the CEO, was there to greet them personally on the grand stone steps. He was a man in his late 50s with a mane of silver hair, a deep tan, and the predatory, confident air of a man who owned the world. "Evelyn, welcome," he boomed, enveloping her in a brief, proprietary hug. His eyes immediately fell on Liam. And this must be the famous assistant I've heard so much about. Marcus, I'd like you to meet Liana Vance, Evelyn said, her voice smooth as cream. I truly couldn't function without her. Liam felt Thorne's eyes sweep over him. A quick, appraising glance that took in everything from his clothes to his posture. It wasn't a lecherous look, but it was intensely analytical, the look of a man assessing an asset. Miss Vance, Thorne said, extending a hand. Welcome to Le Château de Lumière. It's a pleasure to finally meet the woman who keeps this one. He gestured to Evelyn. On schedule. The pleasure is all mine, Mr. Thorne, Liam replied, his voice calm and steady, his handshake light but firm, just as he and Evelyn had practiced. The property is breathtaking. Indeed it is, Thorne said, his smile widening. He seemed pleased by the compliment. We believe in creating the right environment for success. As they were shown inside, Liam was acutely aware of the other couples mingling in the grand, sun-drenched hall. There were about a dozen of them, the executive team and their partners. The men were all versions of Marcus Thorne, powerful and confident. The partners were almost exclusively women, all impeccably dressed, their laughter light and musical. They were the wives, the plus ones, the supporting cast in their husband's corporate drama. And then there was Liana. He was not a wife, not a partner in the traditional sense. He was something else entirely, a tool, a prop. His role here was unique and precarious. He was there to work, to assist Evelyn, but he had to do it while seamlessly blending in with the social fabric of the partners. Their suite was opulent, with a four-poster bed, antique furniture, and a private balcony overlooking the lavender fields. As soon as the bellhop left, Evelyn's demeanor shifted from charming guest to focused commander. All right, unpack my things first, then yours, she ordered, handing him her suitcases. I have the full itinerary here. Our first event is a cocktail reception at 7. You'll wear the navy blue dress. I want a full briefing on the guest list, names, titles, partners' names, by 5 o'clock. Get to work. Liam stood there for a moment, the heavy suitcases in his hands, looking out the window at the beautiful, sun-soaked landscape. He was in one of the most idyllic places on earth, trapped in a beautiful woman's clothes, about to begin a month-long performance that would test the very limits of his sanity. The brand, Liana, had been successfully launched. Now, she had to survive the campaign. The life of a corporate partner at a luxury retreat, Liam quickly discovered, was a strange and delicate dance of leisure and performance. While the executives were shuttled off to intense, day-long synergy sessions and strategy meetings, their partners were treated to a separate, parallel itinerary of curated relaxation activities. Liana's official role was to be on call for Evelyn 24/7, organizing her notes, scheduling side meetings, and managing her communications. But to maintain her cover, she also had to participate in the partners' activities. The first morning, while Evelyn was in a meeting, Liana was scheduled for a group cooking class in the chateau's enormous, sun-drenched kitchen. Liam, who knew how to operate a microwave and a toaster, found himself standing in a pristine white apron beside women who were discussing the finer points of making a bechamel sauce from scratch. Liana, darling, you're so quiet, said a bubbly woman named Chloe, the much younger wife of the CFO. Don't you just adore French cuisine? It's lovely, Liam managed to say, his voice a soft, practiced monotone as he fumbled with a whisk. I'm more of a baker myself. It was a lie he and Evelyn had invented, a safe and domestic hobby for Liana. The women cooed in appreciation. He spent the next 2 hours in a state of quiet panic, trying to follow the chef's instructions, acutely aware of his large, clumsy hands as he tried to delicately chop herbs. He was surrounded by a world of casual, feminine chatter, discussions about interior designers, summer plans in the Hamptons, and the struggles of finding good nannies. He was an alien, a spy in a foreign land, nodding and smiling and saying nothing of substance. The next day's activity was a guided tour of a local perfumery. He stood in a fragrant, flower-filled room, listening to a lecture on top notes and base notes, feeling the itchy wig on his scalp and the constricting pencil skirt around his legs. The other women would dab scents on their wrists and offer them to each other to smell. Oh, you must try this one, Catherine. It has a lovely note of jasmine. When Chloe offered her wrist to him, he instinctively recoiled before catching himself. He leaned in, sniffed, and offered a weak, practiced smile. "Very fresh," he murmured, the sweet, cloying scent making him feel nauseous. He was a ghost in their world, present but not participating. The most difficult part was the constant, low-grade performance. He had to be aware of every gesture. How he sat, knees together, ankles crossed. How he held a wine glass, by the stem, not the bowl. How he laughed, a quiet, breathy chuckle, not his own deep, rumbling laugh. One afternoon, during a private wine tasting, one of the more acerbic wives, a sharp-featured woman named Beatrice, cornered him by the cheese board. "So, Liana," she said, her tone a little too pointed. "You're Evelyn's assistant? It must be so demanding. Does she ever give you a day off?" It was a test, a subtle jab at his ambiguous status. Liam felt a flicker of his old, sarcastic self rise up, a desire to say something cutting. But he suppressed it. Liana wouldn't do that. "Evelyn is a wonderful boss," he said, his voice smooth and pleasant. "I feel very fortunate to have the opportunity to learn from her. And being here is hardly a hardship, wouldn't you agree?" He smiled, a perfect, polite, and utterly impenetrable smile. Beatrice's eyes narrowed for a second, searching for a crack in the facade, but she found none. She gave a tight little nod and moved away. Liam let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He had passed another test. He had successfully performed the role of the loyal, pleasant, and utterly boring female assistant. The victory felt hollow, leaving only the bitter taste of self-betrayal. The days bled into one another, a monotonous cycle of performance and suppression. Liam felt himself sinking, the lines between his true self and the Liana persona blurring into a gray, exhausting fog. He was losing weight from Evelyn's diet, and the low-grade hunger combined with the constant stress left him feeling weak and disconnected. The crack appeared during the third week. The partner activity for the day was a private yoga session held on a stone terrace overlooking the rolling hills of Provence. Liam, as Liana, was dressed in a set of stylish, form-fitting yoga clothes Evelyn had packed for him. The thin, stretchy fabric felt more revealing than any dress, clinging to the subtle, softening contours of his body. The instructor was a lithe, serene woman who led them through a series of flowing movements. Liam, thanks to the forced conditioning from Evelyn, could follow the basic poses, but his body, still fundamentally male, moved with a different kind of strength and rigidity than the women around him. They moved into a challenging balancing pose. Liam wobbled, struggling to find his center. He glanced around. The other women, including the athletic Chloe, were holding the pose with a graceful, seemingly effortless stability. He felt a hot flush of shame. He, a man who had once hauled 50-pound blocks of marble, couldn't even balance on one leg. He lost his focus for a second, and his ankle gave way. He stumbled, pinwheeling his arms to catch his balance, and knocked directly into the woman next to him, the sharp, observant Beatrice. She yelped in surprise as they both tumbled to their mats in an undignified heap. "Oh my God, I am so sorry," Liam exclaimed, his voice coming out in his natural, lower register, the carefully constructed Liana voice completely forgotten in the moment of panic. He scrambled to his feet and offered a hand to Beatrice. She took it, and as his fingers closed around hers, she looked up at him. Her eyes, usually so sharp and critical, were wide with a new, dawning sense of confusion. He had spoken as a man. His hand, though softer than it used to be, still had the size and strength of a man's. "I'm so clumsy," he added quickly, forcing his voice back up into the softer, higher pitch. "Please forgive me, Beatrice." Beatrice said nothing. She allowed him to help her up, but she didn't let go of his hand immediately. She just stood there, her gaze fixed on him, a strange, analytical expression on her face. It was as if she were seeing him for the first time, not as Liana, but as a collection of discordant details that didn't quite add up. The height, the breadth of his shoulders, the voice that had momentarily dropped, the strength in his hand. The yoga instructor quickly moved on, but the moment had shattered the peaceful atmosphere. For the rest of the session, Liam could feel Beatrice's eyes on him. He felt exposed, a specimen under a microscope. He had made a mistake, a critical error in his performance, and he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that she had seen it. The perfect, seamless brand of Liana Vance had just sprung its first, dangerous leak. The aftermath of the yoga incident was a quiet, agonizing Cold War. Beatrice didn't say anything, didn't confront him, but her demeanor had changed. She watched him. During meals, during the forced social hours, he would look up and find her gaze on him, not with malice, but with a sharp, piercing intelligence. It was the look of a woman trying to solve a complex and fascinating puzzle. Evelyn, consumed with the final stages of wooing Marcus Thorne, didn't notice the subtle shift in the social dynamics. She only saw that Liana was still performing her duties, and that was all that mattered. The confrontation came a few days later. Liam was in the chateau's vast, quiet library, tasked with transcribing Evelyn's notes from a morning meeting. He was alone, or so he thought. "You're not who you say you are." The voice came from behind him, quiet but firm. Liam froze, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. He turned slowly. Beatrice was standing in the doorway, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "I don't know what you mean," Liam said, his Liana voice a weak defense. "Don't," Beatrice said, walking into the room and closing the doors behind her. The voice, the way you stumbled in yoga, the way you knew more about wine pairings last night than a simple assistant should. It doesn't add up. She stopped in front of the desk, her eyes locking onto his. "You're her husband, aren't you?" Liam, the artist. The name hit him like a punch. To be called his own name, to be seen for who he truly was for the first time in a month, was so shocking that he couldn't form a lie. The facade crumbled. He simply nodded, a wave of exhaustion and defeat washing over him. He expected scorn, blackmail, a triumphant exposé. Instead, Beatrice pulled up a chair and sat down, her expression softening into something unexpected, weary sympathy. "I knew it," she said, more to herself than to him. "That woman is a shark. I've seen her in boardrooms. I always wondered what kind of man could live with that." She looked at him, her eyes surprisingly kind. "My husband, Richard, is the CFO. Do you think he's any different from Marcus Thorne? Do you think I enjoy being dragged around the world as a corporate accessory, forced to make small talk with women I have nothing in common with?" She leaned forward, her voice dropping. "I saw the way Evelyn looks at you. Not like a boss, but like an owner. This isn't just a disguise, is it? This is something else." Liam, seeing an unexpected and desperate chance for an ally, found himself confiding in her. In a low, pained whisper, he told her the basics. The failed art career, the financial dependency, the rebranding, the threat of being thrown out. He didn't tell her everything, but he told her enough. Beatrice listened without interruption, her expression hardening with each detail. "That's not a deal," she said when he had finished. "That's coercive control. It's abuse, Liam." Hearing the word abuse spoken by someone else was a revelation. It validated the deep, unspoken wrongness he had been feeling for weeks. "What are you going to do?" Beatrice asked. "I don't know," he admitted, the hopelessness returning. "She has all the power. I have nothing." Beatrice was silent for a moment, her sharp mind clearly working. "Maybe not," she said slowly. "Marcus Thorne values image above all else. Loyalty, stability, partnership. A scandal, a story about his star new PR executive blackmailing her husband into pretending to be a woman. That kind of story would be toxic. It would kill the deal instantly, and it would destroy her career." She looked him straight in the eye. "She thinks she has all the power. But you, Liana, are her single greatest vulnerability. You just have to decide when and how you're going to use that." The final night of the retreat was a grand, black-tie gala. It was the culmination of the month-long charm offensive, the night Marcus Thorne was expected to unofficially announce his decision to hire Evelyn's firm. For Evelyn, it was the finish line. For Liam, it was the breaking point. Beatrice's words had ignited a spark of defiance in him, a spark he had thought was long extinguished. He now had a weapon, the truth. The question was, did he have the courage to use it? He stood in their suite as Evelyn prepared him for the evening. The dress she had chosen was the pinnacle of Liana's constructed femininity. It was a floor-length, shimmering silver gown that clung to his frame, the fabric cool and heavy against his skin. The diet and the soy supplements had done their work. His body was leaner, softer, the illusion more seamless than ever. The makeup was dramatic, the wig perfectly coiffed. Looking in the mirror, he saw a beautiful, sad-eyed woman. He saw a perfect, Polished lie. This is it, Liam, Evelyn said, her eyes glittering with excitement as she adjusted a diamond earring on his earlobe. Tonight is everything. All you have to do is play your part for 3 more hours. Smile, look supportive, and be invisible. Can you do that? Yes, Evelyn, he said, his voice a perfect, compliant whisper. But as he looked at her triumphant reflection in the mirror, all he felt was a cold, hard resolve. The gala was held in the chateau's grand ballroom. The atmosphere was thick with success and expensive champagne. Marcus Thorne took to the small stage at the front of the room, ready to give his final speech. Evelyn stood near the front, her posture radiating confidence, with Liana a half-step behind her, the perfect, loyal assistant. Thorne began his speech, talking about synergy, vision, and the future of his company. Liam's heart was hammering against his ribs. It was now or never. He looked across the room and caught Beatrice's eye. She gave him a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. It was all the encouragement he needed. As Thorne was winding up to the big announcement, Liam took a small, deep breath. Then, he took a deliberate step forward, moving from behind Evelyn to stand beside her. He reached up, and with a single, decisive movement, he pulled off the wig. A collective gasp went through the room. The sleek, auburn bob came off, revealing his own shorter, masculine hair underneath. The silence was sudden and absolute. Every eye in the room was on him. Thorne stopped mid-sentence, his mouth agape. Evelyn spun around, her face a mask of pure, horrified disbelief. Liam, what in God's name are you doing? She hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. He ignored her. He looked directly at Marcus Thorne, his voice, his own deep, clear voice, ringing out in the silent ballroom. My name is Liam Vance, he said, his hands trembling but his gaze steady. I am Evelyn's husband, and for the past month, at her insistence and under threat of being left homeless, I have been forced to live as her female assistant, Liana, to help her secure your contract. He let the words hang in the air, the scandal unfolding in real time. He saw the shock, the confusion, and then the dawning, horrified understanding on the faces of the guests. He saw Chloe's jaw drop. He saw Richard, Beatrice's husband, stare in stunned disbelief. He looked at Evelyn. The color had drained from her face. Her carefully constructed world, her perfect brand, was imploding before her very eyes. She looked at him with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. Then he looked at Marcus Thorne. The CEO's face was unreadable, a mask of stone. The deal, the partnership, the future Evelyn had been so sure of, all of it now rested on the reaction of this one powerful man. Liam had set the fire. Now he had to wait and see what would be left after it burned. The silence in the ballroom stretched for an eternity. It was a thick, suffocating blanket of shock and scandal. Every person in the room was frozen, their eyes flicking between the man in the silver dress, the horrified PR executive, and the powerful CEO on the stage whose multi-million-dollar retreat had just been spectacularly detonated. Evelyn was the first to recover. Her survival instincts, honed in 1,000 ruthless corporate battles, took over. He's lying, she exclaimed, her voice sharp and shrill. My husband is unwell. He's having a breakdown due to the failure of his art career. I brought him here to help him recover, and this is how he repays me. This is a pathetic cry for attention. It was a brilliant, vicious pivot. She was already spinning the narrative, painting him as the unstable, vindictive spouse. A few murmurs of sympathy for her rippled through the crowd. But before the narrative could take hold, another voice cut through the tension. She's not lying about the pressure he's been under, said Beatrice, stepping forward from the crowd. But he's not the one who's unwell. She looked directly at Marcus Thorne. Marcus, I've seen it for a month. This wasn't an act of support. It was an act of control. I think if you check the security footage from the yoga terrace a week ago, you might see a very different story. The mention of security footage, the public support from the CFO's wife, it was a confirmation, a second source. The tide of opinion in the room began to turn. This was no longer just a domestic dispute. It was a corporate liability. Marcus Thorne finally moved. He descended the steps from the stage, his face a grim, unreadable mask. He walked slowly, deliberately, through the parted crowd until he was standing in front of the trio. He didn't look at Liam. He didn't look at Evelyn. His eyes were fixed on some distant point, as if he were calculating complex risk algorithms in his head. Evelyn, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Is what your husband says true? No, of course not. He's delusional, Evelyn insisted, her voice trembling with a desperate, frantic energy. Thorne's gaze finally shifted and settled on her. The cold, analytical power in his eyes was terrifying. My brand is built on integrity, stability, and family values, he said, each word a chip of ice. My merger, my public image, cannot and will not be associated with this. He gestured vaguely at the scene, the man in the dress, the wife making accusations. The perception, whether true or not, is a contagion I cannot afford. He turned to his head of security, who had materialized by his side. Please escort Ms. Vance and her husband off the property immediately. Their invitation is revoked. He looked at Evelyn one last time, his voice utterly final. Needless to say, our negotiations are concluded. My legal team will be in touch with your firm in the morning. It was over. In less than 5 minutes, Liam's single act of defiance had utterly destroyed Evelyn's career-defining ambition. The contract was gone. The partnership was gone. Her reputation was in tatters. As the security guards approached, Evelyn looked at Liam. The hatred in her eyes was so pure, so intense, it was almost incandescent. She had lost everything. But as he stood there, feeling the cool air of the ballroom on his bare scalp, wearing a ridiculous silver dress and the remnants of a woman's makeup, Liam didn't feel triumphant. He just felt a vast, empty, and terrifying sense of freedom. He had won the battle, but the war for his own future had just begun. The ride back to their suite, escorted by 2 silent security guards, was a journey of suffocating silence. The door closed behind them, and for a moment, they just stood there, the man in the silver dress and the woman whose world had just been shattered. You, Evelyn finally whispered, her voice a low, trembling hiss of pure venom. You destroyed me. No, Evelyn, Liam said, his voice quiet but steady, devoid of the fear that had defined his life for months. You destroyed yourself. I just held up a mirror. He walked into the bedroom, ignoring her, and began to remove the last vestiges of Liana. He peeled off the glittering dress, letting it fall to the floor in a shimmering heap. He sat in front of the vanity and, using a wipe, began to methodically scrub the makeup from his face, erasing the smoky eyes and the berry-stained lips. He was no longer a beautiful woman or a humiliated man. He was just himself. He packed a single bag with the few items that were still his, the old jeans and t-shirt he had arrived in, his sketchbook, his wallet. He had no money, no home, no plan. But he had his name. Where do you think you're going? Evelyn demanded, appearing in the doorway. I don't know, he said honestly, zipping the bag. But I'm not staying here. We're done. Done? She laughed, a harsh, broken sound. You have nothing, Liam. You're going back to being a pathetic, failed artist with not a penny to your name. You'll come crawling back within a week. He stood up and faced her. For the first time, he wasn't looking at her as a dependent, a project, or a victim. He was looking at her as an equal. Maybe, he said, maybe I'll fail, but it will be my failure. On my own terms. That's more than I've had in a very long time. He walked past her, out of the suite, and down the long, opulent hallway. He didn't take the main elevator. He found the service stairs and walked down, flight after flight, the echo of his footsteps the only sound. He emerged into the cool, pre-dawn air of the French countryside. He walked down the long gravel driveway, the stones crunching under his feet. He didn't know where the nearest town was, or how he would get there. He just walked. With each step, he felt the weight of Liana, the weight of his dependency, the weight of his shame, begin to lift. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft, golden light over the lavender fields. The air was clean and fresh. He had nothing. But as a sculptor, he knew that sometimes, to create something new, you first had to strip away everything from the raw material. You had to find the true form hidden within the stone. He had been deconstructed, reshaped, and put on display. But he hadn't broken. He had been stripped down to his very core. He was a blank canvas, a raw block of marble. And for the first time in years, he was free to decide what masterpiece he would become. He kept walking, into the light of the new day, ready to begin.